Well, the premise of this presentation was really based on the fact that I drive down a road here near my house, and I've lived here for 10 years. And every every spring and fall, there are one or two trees that I'm like, gosh, what is that tree? And I I rack my brain trying to figure out what the tree is, and because it looks so different in the spring. Maybe it's blooming, or in the fall, it has dried seed pods on it. And so I just thought, I'm probably not the only one who is driving down the road. And I've had a lot of people say, hey, have you seen that tree over on Dove Road? What is that? And so I thought, well, I'll just talk about some of those trees that are kind of unique to landscapes that we don't see in everybody's landscape. And it might be a tree that you're interested in putting in your landscape. So we're going to some of the common trees that we have in our landscapes, we're not really going to talk about today. So I'm just pointing out some of those. Magnolias, you should all be able to recognize one of those. The Bradford pear, which was overplanted in the 90s, and people are trying to get rid of them because they're just a 15, 20-year tree. They are gorgeous in the fall and in the spring, but they are not. They're not a great long-term tree for a yard, and they can cause a lot of damage when they break apart. The live oak, which a lot of people have in this area, post oak, which I have 65 of in my garden, and then the Yukon holly, which is really kind of common in people's landscapes as well. So those are the ones you all should be able to identify as you drive down the road. And so as I said, we're not going to discuss those today. So let's talk about spring flowering trees. Here I've picked a collection of pink flowering trees. As you drive down the road, you're like, wow, that is just gorgeous. What is that? And we have a cherry, which is not really common in our area, but there are weeping cherries people try to plant in Texas, and they're gorgeous. But they have a lot of trunk issues. They're susceptible to lots of different diseases, and really have to be managed with kit gloves. I have a neighbor who has a beautiful weeping cherry in her front yard, but the sprinkler has hit it time and time again, and has rotted the trunk and exposed the inside of the trunk, and it's really on its last leg, and she just is trying to baby it. Peach trees, which we have a lot of peach trees in Texas. I don't see them in landscapes nearly as much as maybe in a field next to a home. And a peach tree is a great addition. And one of the things that's real noticeable about a peach tree is that you can have the branching at the bottom. So if you drive by a peach tree, you might, or a flowering tree, you'll see these branches closer to the bottom, and that might indicate more of a fruit tree. So then we have the red bud, and there's lots of varieties of red buds. Mexican buckeye is something that is common and makes a great landscape tree, but many landscapes do not consider it. And then the saucer, which is an awesome tree, and there's probably 50 different varieties of saucer magnolias. So I am going to talk about the red bud, variety of red bud, the Mexican buckeye, and the saucer magnolia. So the Mexican buckeye, I have one of these in my garden, and it's a wonderful tree. It tends to grow, as you see in the far right here, more as a bush, and can be trimmed back to be manageable as a small tree. I have never seen one treed up with a main trunk, but then I've not seen a whole lot of them in our landscapes. So it's a deciduous tree. It does bloom in the spring, and this is a picture of it here in the lower left blooming, and isn't that just a very beautiful tree. And then as the blooms fade, the leaves come out, and you can see how the leaves are a longer pointed leaf, more linear than they are round. So that differentiates it from a red bud. A red bud's going to have a bigger, thicker round leaf on it. And so if you see a flowering tree with leaves coming out that are long and pointed, it possibly can be a buckeye, especially if it's in a more shrub form. Now here's a picture of it in the fall, and mine has turned, but not that brilliant. And I'm hoping that this cold snap that we have had is going to help these trees turn a little bit more brilliant before they're ready. So we have the buckeye is a deciduous tree. It's full sun. Deciduous means it does lose its leaves in the winter. You'll hear that word many times in this presentation. It can be a little bit more drought tolerant, so it makes it for a great backdrop to agaves, cacti, things like that might be in your garden if you want to have more of a xeriscape garden. The seeds are poisonous. I think maybe other parts of it may be poisonous as well. So if you have dogs, possibly not put this in an enclosed backyard where the dogs are. And it has both spring and fall color. It can be managed to a height of 10 to 15 feet. Mine is right at about 8 feet, and it's about 4 or 5 years old. The saucer magnolia, as I said, there's many varieties of this. I have a Jane magnolia, which is a darker purple, and then I have another variety, which I'm not sure what it is, and it's this lighter pink. One blooms very, very early in February, and most every year the blooms get frozen or frostbit and are not brilliant. Every third year I'll see just beautiful blooms on it. This one you can tell definitely that's a saucer magnolia in the spring because it has bigger flower bloom on it, and they're turned up like a saucer in a cup. The purple one that I have blooms just a little later, and it is protected by some post oaks, so it doesn't freeze nearly as much. But again, these are deciduous. They make a beautiful green tree in your landscape during the summer. And anyhow, they're just a very remarkable tree. They need ample watering, and they can get large, but you can prune them to be up next to the house and not overbearing. But check out some of the unique varieties that they have. I will tell you, I have a Jane magnolia, and the reason I purchased it is because my name is Wanda Jane, my daughter's name is Sarah Jane, and my dog's name is Macy Jane. So we are the Jane family, and I thought that was kind of cute. The Oklahoma redbud. Now, we've all seen other redbuds here in Texas. The Oklahoma redbud is a dark purple. So sometimes you're driving down the road and you'll see what you know is a redbud, and then the next house over you'll see one that's like 2 times darker. That is an Oklahoma redbud. They do grow just fine here. They prefer an under canopy of a tree because in the summer the really harsh sun can just keep it in more of a desperate state, I guess. Just like all of our redbuds really prefer a little bit of afternoon shade and or canopy cover. So it's a brilliant dark purple, and it makes a great accent tree for a landscape, and will grow here. Up here on Dove Road in Westlake, they have several of them. They have lost some of them, the ones that were in full sun. They have lost those, but they still have a few more. And anyhow, so consider the variety for your garden if you need to add a tree. Makes it just a beautiful spot of color in the spring. Mexican plum. Now we're getting into other colors of flowering trees. This tree I don't see very often here, but it is a beautiful white flowering tree. So you're going to see this, and then you're going to see a Bradford pear, and you're not going to know the difference. Or you're going to see this, and you're going to see a maybe a different type of cherry tree that blooms more white than pink. But this Mexican plum has a very true white flower on it and little clusters, as you can see here. It does make a fruit, but it's not an edible fruit. And it will have a little pink fruits on it here. What I love about this tree is that it's spring flowering, and then in the fall it can turn like a oak leaf hydrangea. So you know how the oak leaf hydrangea can make some really pretty colors, and that's sometimes one of our only color additives in the fall in our garden is the oak leaf hydrangea, and it has rich dark reds and greens and yellows, and so this Mexican plum will do the same in your garden. Again, it's kind of a fruit tree. It probably needs to be pruned more like a fruit tree, but it's a nice additive, and I think you would enjoy that as well. The eastern dogwood. We have a lot of dogwoods to choose from. The eastern dogwood is, I'm from East Tennessee, and of course we had so many dogwoods there, and they were most of them all this eastern dogwood. But we don't see them a lot here. They do like a little bit more water than some of our landscapes. They are an understory tree. They do not do well in full sun. So it's definitely best under our oaks. And I know most of you all are in the Cross Timbers area where we have trees. And so if you plant one, just make sure it doesn't get afternoon sun. It maybe could tolerate morning sun, but not afternoon sun. Has beautiful color in the spring with its flowers. And what's interesting about a dogwood is the down here where the flowers are, the bracts, the white, or what we call the flower, are really bracts. The flower is the center part. And then that turns into these beautiful berries in the fall. So you can have some really nice color in the fall as well. And then dogwoods have usually always been known for their fall color on their leaves. So something to consider. Again, another tree that gives you spring color and fall color. And of course, it is deciduous.
Wanda, can we go back to we had a question
Okay.
from Donna on the saucer magnolia, and I just looked at this.
Okay.
And I'm sorry that I didn't
That's
see
fine.
it. Does the saucer magnolia handle our alkaline soils better than the regular magnolias?
I think it's comparable. I see them. I think it's comparable. They're the saucer magnolia grows throughout the Southwest and the Southeast very well, and so does the regular magnolia. So I think they're comparable. Hope that answers your question, Donna.
Thank you.
So moving on from the eastern dogwood, let's talk about the evergreen dogwood. Not a real common tree here, but definitely will grow here. I just saw one, really, really pretty one in East Texas in Tyler at the Rose Garden. It was at the Master Gardener demonstration gardens there next to the Rose Garden. And it was probably only about 12 feet tall, but it was really pretty. The evergreen has blooms in the summer and in the spring, and then it has more of a berry or a ball type seed pod uh, it, that would probably be produced in the fall or late or early spring, or I mean late spring. I'm sorry. So anyhow, that really neat tree, great addition to our shady yards. Definitely recommend it. From a distance, it might look like uh, um, I'm sitting here staring out the window at this tree, a mock orange. From a distance, it would probably look like a mock orange in bloom, but definitely, definitely a really pretty tree and something we can consider for our gardens. This is a newer red bud that's come on the market. It is a pink flowering a red bud in the spring, so it's going to look just like a lot of our other red buds in the spring. Not going to be nearly as dark as the Oklahoma red bud, but pink flowering. And this one kind of messes with me a little bit because it has the rich golds and oranges, but yet the flower is pink. And those do not go well in a color scheme. So I know the other trees have pink flowers, but they have a darker green leaf. So this is really unique. And I know that you all have seen this in people's backyards as you're driving down the road. The, the limbs come out and they get lighter and lighter to the tips. It's kind of a fast growing tree. I've noticed it in several yards and landscapes how quickly it grows. Tony Moore had one that grew very fast and very tall, and it was chopped down and has started coming back from the root or from the stump again, and she has allowed it to bush up again. So it needs ample watering in the landscape. Has beautiful purple blooms. Can get kind of large, but you can keep it trimmed as well. But it takes full sun. So this is your one red bud that you can put in full sun and be confident that it'll do just fine. So kind of unique in that respect. And these are very common in nurseries now. Texas Mountain Laurel. I know most of you are familiar with Texas Mountain Laurel. It is the slowest growing shrub. A friend of mine wanted to plant one that was about a foot tall and in a spot that needed a tree that was about 12 feet tall. And I said, well, in 20 years, when you're moving to assisted living, it'll be 12 feet tall. So, and I don't even know if in 20 years it would be. They're very slow growing. They're a beautiful addition. They're evergreen. But if you buy one, buy a large one, the largest you can get. And I have never seen them in the nursery more than 3 gallon, 5 gallon. I've really never seen them. They're probably very expensive at that size, but they're not going to make a statement in your garden unless they're 10, 15 years old. They make a really fun seed pod. And we've taught people how to propagate those seeds in the past. I've never been successful because with the propagation of those seeds, but I know a few people who have. The seed has to be scarified, meaning it has to be scratched and broken apart in a sense before it would germinate. So anyhow, I know you've seen these trees, but that is a Texas Mountain Laurel, and it's not a Vitex. Vitex grow completely different and have a different leaf on them. Eve's Necklace, another unique tree. It is deciduous. The ones I have seen have all been maintained to be maybe a 12 to 15 foot height. They have a leaf structure. It's a compound leaf. So each of the individual pieces are leaves are not actually the leaf. The whole leaf is the the whole, what we would call the stem. That is the complete leaf. It makes a beautiful flower cluster in the spring, and then as the flowers fade, it makes these strings of seeds, which are called, look like a necklace. Those can be a little messy, and I think some birds really enjoy those. But a really, really pretty tree throughout the summer and can make a great landscape tree. It just needs about a minimal landscape watering and a grow on average.
Linda,
Because,
Linda
go
has a
ahead.
question on the Texas mountain laurel.
Okay.
She says, I've heard the blooms of the mountain laurel are poisonous. Is that true?
Well, I'm the blooms may be poisonous, but I'm pretty certain the seeds are as well. So a lot of our trees and flowers and shrubs are poisonous, and there are levels of poisonous. So definitely research it before you put it in your landscape if your pets are going to be around them.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we're going to move on to the smoke tree. I've seen a few of these in Texas. As you move towards Austin, I think you see more of them. It's also a deciduous tree. It can handle a little bit more full sun. This one can be groomed in the landscape in your garden to stay more as a shrub and not as a tree. But if left unmanaged, they can get very large. And you can see here that a lot of times they want to be a multi-trunk. They're not a single trunk. If you come across a single trunk, that is okay as well. But in most cases, they tend to be a multi-trunk. Their foliage is what is so amazing in that it variates as it goes across the limb, and then it produces these smoky blooms that give it a softness. So another really unique tree to add to your landscape. So it's very noticeable when it has its blooms. You can definitely tell it's a smoke tree. Now we talk about trees that provide fabulous fall color. When you're looking for pictures on the internet of fall landscapes, I even Googled Texas fall landscapes. Nothing really comes up because we're not really known for our fall color. But I chose these two because these two can be, they could be adapted to Texas. I mean, you have some fall color here in the brown house area, but in the White House, you have possibly that is a maple there in the front, and then this could be, I don't know, a ginkgo or something like that on the side. So we can produce these colors in Texas. It does depend on how cold we get, how early and how cold we are, but usually a good cold snap like what we've just had will help slow those sugars down, go into the leaves, and produce more brilliant colors. So let's talk about the ginkgo tree. It is not used that widely in Texas. It can handle full sun. I mean, not widely in our landscapes, I'm sorry. It's deciduous. It's, has the unique leaf up here that kind of looks like a manta ray. And these are the seeds. Not very noticeable at all. Seed pods. And then if you, one thing you do not want to do is buy a female tree. They produce the fruit here, and the fruit, when falling and rotting, smells like manure and is horrible. It'll make you gag. The nurseries know this, and I would think that any reputable nursery would never carry a female tree to sell. So just make sure you ask first. But they produce just the most gorgeous golden color in the fall. And that is where we could get that color that you saw on that White House that in the previous picture is this beautiful golden color. They're they need ample water. They have an average growth rate, and they just produce a beautiful fall color. As Chinese pistache, I only mention this because this is a common tree that we do see as we drive down the road, and people were always like, "Wow, what is that?" Especially this time of year, because this picture right here is indicative of what we're seeing right now. It has these colors on the tips, and so you're thinking, "Oh wow, it's fall. It's really nice." But what is that tree? Well, it's a Chinese pistache, and we're using them very frequently in our landscapes around here. And I think that people are getting burnt out with them. They're a more expensive landscape tree. When you go to choose landscape trees, your post oaks, live oaks, and such are in one category price range, and Chinese pistache is going to be one step above that. They're a good tree, a good landscape tree. They have a spring bloom and a fall and some berries here that will show. And then a lot of what we're seeing on these trees here in the fall is just the leaf and the berries and everything just turning and drying out. So again, a deciduous tree, and but that is what you're seeing in so many landscapes as you drive down the road. This one, everybody needs one of these. They're just so fun. I have a possum holly around my pool, and I just love them. What's different about a possum holly and a yopon is the possum holly loses its leaves and leaves these amazing berries. A yopon will have the berries and the leaves, and they'll keep those throughout the winter, and the birds will feast on the berries. But a possum haw will lose its leaves, and so when you're driving down the road and you see this this tree on the side of the road with all these berries and no leaves around November, then that is a possum haw holly. I did add this little picture up here on the right because in a lot of landscapes, it's grown more as a shrub. The one thing I don't like about mine is it puts off shoots from the roots, and I'm constantly trimming them. Also, mine is a multi-trunk, and I think that if I were to do it again, I would try to prune a smaller seedling to be more in a two-trunk fashion like the ones on the left. But I grew mine from a very small tree, and so it's more of a shrub. But anyhow, this one definitely gives you the berries, and if you like to do anything in the winter, like around Christmas with floral arranging, these make a great accent to a floral arrangement. I have never seen these possum haw hollies any much bigger than 10 to 15 feet. I'm not sure if they're being pruned to that height, but I don't see them getting much bigger than that. A shoe-marred red oak, and the reason I'm choosing shoe-marred, red oaks are promiscuous, and so a shoe-marred and another red oak could share and reproduce a sapling that is not necessarily a shoe-marred. So it's best to go to a reputable nursery and try to get one that is definitely a shoe-marred. They have the most brilliant colors in the fall, and but they also drop their acorns, and everybody that I know that has a shoe-marred, they have probably 1,000 seedlings under their trees every season, which is not something we really appreciate, and so they will mow them down and such. But you can avoid that by raking up the acorns and just keeping it clean under the tree. But look at that color. That is just amazing. The way you can tell a red oak versus most any other oak is that the leaf has needle points on the end of it. So if you go to a tree, a green oak tree in somebody's yard, and they say, well, I don't know what that is, and it's the middle of summer, and you take a leaf and it has points on it, it is in the red oak family. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a shoe mard, but it is in the red oak family. So that's a great way to tell the difference. And that was my first oak tree I learned. Post oaks have real rounded, lobed leaves, and they are easy to identify as well. So if you know the difference between them, it's easy to know two oak trees. Bald cypress tree. Down the road here, there are 3 of these growing, 2 in one yard and another in another yard. And I was driving past yesterday and really slowly to see if there were any needs in the yard. If you see this little picture that says the needs pop up in the lawn, so sometimes closer to a water source, the cypress tree will shoot these needs up. In our soil where it may be well drained, you may not get as many needs. The needs are popping up because the soil is damp, and that's more of a way for the tree to get its oxygen and to have its root system stay dried out. You see these trees a lot next to ponds, rivers, lakes, things like that. I like them because they turn this brilliant color in the fall. And they do that here in Texas too. If you know anyone that has one, pay attention to it over the next few weeks, and you'll see that they'll turn this brilliant brown, and then they'll drop their needles. They can be kind of messy, and then of course you have to deal with the knees. We were out at East Texas, and they had some near a pond, and they had a lot of knees that had been shaved off so that the mowers could get over them. And it is okay to shave the knees. But when I drove by my neighbors down the road, I didn't see any knees sticking up, and they were in a well-drained area. So I'm wondering if they have fewer knees to deal with there. So another neat tree. Now this tree can get very large. So make sure you plant it in a place where it has room to grow and get tall. There are a lot of Japanese maples, and I know most of y'all have heard of metro maples, and he carries probably 30 or 40 varieties of Japanese maples. And he is definitely an expert on maples. But this one is a bloodgood maple, and I like it because it's more, it can tolerate a little bit of part sun. It would prefer not to have afternoon sun at all. It is a reddish color leaf throughout the year, where I have a dwarf Japanese maple, and it is definitely green through the summer, and then it turns colors in the fall, and then when the new leaves come out in the spring, it's red. But in a bloodgood, it tends to stay a little bit redder all year. Makes a great accent tree for a garden. And again, it prefers to be an understory tree or to not have fall afternoon sun. What happens to maples, Japanese maples, when they get too much sun, is they get blisters on their trunks. And then that allows for insects and things to get into the tree and kill it. So we definitely want to keep it protected. But I love this. You can keep it. I have one that is probably 10 feet tall, and I have another one that is probably 25 feet tall. So again, great addition. It's a variety that you will enjoy. Red bark maple. Every now and then you'll find these in somebody's yard. I have never seen one taller than about 8 feet. I do believe that some people have more issues with growing them. They're probably a little bit more finicky maple. but small garden, they will look really pretty. They make a very chartreuse leaf in the spring, and then they can turn colors in the fall. This one up here, that's a spring blooming with the chartreuse with the red on the tips. I am actually, when looking at this, thinking that maybe this image right here is not a red bark maple. So ignore that. That looks like a different type of maple. But anyhow, striking in the winter, if you want a little color in your garden, something definitely a specimen tree for your garden. A lace bark elm. I love the bark on these trees, and if you want interest in your garden, these are really pretty. At the Keller City Hall, right out front, they have probably space. They're very tall. They're probably about 30 feet tall. They're been there for 10 years or so, and there's probably 10 trees spaced in front of their complex. They're very pretty. The bark is really unique. They have Asian jasmine growing under, so that when those little bitty leaves fall everywhere, they hide down in the Asian jasmine, because those little leaves they can fall by the ton and be very messy. The other thing that will happen with an elm is that you'll get a million seedlings. So they probably mow that Asian jasmine underneath their trees to keep seedlings at bay. But great tree if you're looking for color, interest in the bark and the trunk of the tree when it's deciduous in the fall and winter. That can handle full sun, and they can get large as well. But again, you're going to have a lot of baby elm trees. River birch tree. I've seen these in Grapevine at the Botanic Garden, and just recently down the road, we've had some new homes put in, and one person invested quite heavily in his landscape. And there are actually 3 of these river birches. And then there's more of a deciduous garden entrance to a ranch down from my house, and they have some river birches right around their front entry. And really striking. The trunk on the tree is just fun, and you can peel those layers off, and then it has a green leaf with these, it looks like a sawtooth edge on it. So definitely you can tell that that is the tree. Look how pretty yellow it will turn in the fall. These 2 pictures may have been taken further north than where we are, but this year it'll be interesting to see with our cold snap if these trees down the street from me turn this brilliant yellow. And if they do, then I'm going to try to figure out a place to put one in my garden, because I think it's really neat. Of course, if it's a river birch, it may mean that it needs a little bit more water in the landscape. But those of us who do water our landscapes or are fortunate to have well water might be able to get away with planting them. So really neat tree. Sweet gum tree. We saw these a lot in Tennessee, and there are some here in Texas. I've seen some on different campuses. A lot of people don't really want to grow a sweet gum tree because of their seed pods. They're very painful to step on. I stepped on a million of them when I was a kid, and then before they rot or dry out, I'm going to say dry out, they're a very hard ball, and they really hurt when you step on them. But the sweet gum tree can turn brilliant colors in your landscape in the fall, and so also a very neat addition, something to consider. It can get very large. My height here, 20 to 30 feet in Texas. I think we've probably seen them even taller than that. So another unique tree. and then you can tell by the type of seed pod that is on there, and those green seed pods will start early on, and it takes them several months to fall off the tree. So if you see those on the tree, you'll know that's a sweet gum tree. There are other trees that grow in our landscape that you may not think about adding. This is a weeping willow. Again, they need plenty of water, and they're usually found near a pond or a water source of some sort. They are deciduous. I have one in full sun. However, I do believe that it doesn't get late afternoon sun, but they have grown in full sun in other places. They're an average growing rate. They have, I've had a little issue with mine. Mine has not grown nearly as fast as I thought it would. And anyhow, but it's a neat tree. I remember in Tennessee we had them a lot, and we would swing on their branches as children, and that was kind of fun. But I love the way it adds a different element to a garden, our landscape with its weeping stems.
Mary Lou asks if they have a very short life or not.
Mary Lou, I'm not quite sure. Here in Texas, in other places, they do not. They can live many, many years. I could probably go back to the areas that I played at when I was younger, and they may still be there. So in Texas, I'm not sure what their lifespan is. I'm sorry. So moving on, we have the Japanese black pine tree. Again, down the road, this is what's so interesting. Probably why I decided to do this presentation is because there are probably 7 or 8 homes down Ottinger Road here in Texas, in Keller, that have some of these unique trees. They have the bald cypress, they have the Japanese black pine. Now, I said on here that the Japanese black pine can get 10, 15 feet tall. I just noticed that the lady who has 2 of these, that hers are more like 20 feet tall. But really fluffy, add a bunch of evergreen to your landscape in the fall and the winter when we have no other. And a great place for birds to nest in. And I just love the way it just adds texture to your garden. There are no noticeable blooms really, but there are pine cones and such that come from there. And it's more drought tolerant for us. So great addition to the landscape. And then we have a tulip popular, and I have now seen 2 or 3 of these popping up in landscapes. There's one home over on Alta Vista that's a smaller home that probably is 1/8 of an acre, and they have planted one in their far corner, and it is really a pretty tree to drive by. However, for their small landscape, it's going to be overbearing for them. These can get very, very large and in diameter, but they produce a really pretty flower in the spring. And what's funny is I grew up with these trees in Tennessee, and I've seen very few of them in Texas, but apparently somebody's selling them at nurseries. And if you have a wide open space and want a really unique tree, you can consider a tulip poplar. Now, the tree trunks that I'm seeing on our poplar trees here are more like this. They have a lot of attributes, where this picture down here is what the internet is telling me that the poplar tree looks like, and I have some handbooks as well, and this bark down here is what I'm seeing. However, the trees that I'm seeing in these landscapes have more of an interest on their trunk. And even this picture here, where it shows the green tree, it shows some interest. So I'm not quite sure where the disconnect is with that. But again, kind of like the magnolia, the blooms come out in the spring and summer, and about the size of a magnolia blossom. So it's kind of neat. This is a chautauqua tree, and I had 6 of them in my garden, and they're lined my driveway. I am now down to 3 of them. They are probably 15 years old. They're the size here at this house on the bottom picture. They are a really unique tree. They have a tulip blossom, as you can see here, and they make, I call them the Dr. Seuss tree because they grow kind of like Dr. Seuss drew his trees, and they have this bloom on them. They bloom all summer. They hummingbirds, everybody loves them, but they are the messiest trees that we can have in our landscape besides the live oak. They're constantly dropping their blossoms and dropping their leaves. What I have allowed them to do, they drop them on the driveway, and then in a large growing area where they're rooted, I blow the leaves in there and just let them compost under the trees. I would spend hours and hours raking those leaves up or cleaning out that garden if I didn't just allow them to do that. And they compost pretty quickly, dry out, they blow around, but very messy tree, but really unique. I have a master gardener friend who has one that's very large, but it's out away from the house. It's in a grassy area, and you can mow under it, and you can just mow all that debris in. So placement of this tree is really key. I would not put it in a flower bed, and I would not put it over concrete or near a pool. It would be a nemesis to a pool. But it's full sun and deciduous and really unique. I don't know how much longer my 3 trees that are left, they're the 3 biggest, healthiest ones. They're 15 years old now. They probably, I'm going to give them another 5 years, and we'll see how they do. I don't know that they're going to live much past another 5 years. So with all that, that's a lot of trees, probably about 24 trees to consider. And, let's get planting with our trees. You want to choose a location in your landscape. Ask yourself some questions. Do you want a statement tree small, a shade tree? Do you want deciduous? Do you want evergreen? Do you want spring color or fall color? So lots of questions to ask yourself. Are you going to water it yourself, or are you going to let nature water it? And when you do plant it, you definitely want to do this. This is the biggest no-no we see in Texas. This is the root flare of this tree, and it had been covered up. You can see the line at which the soil had been brought up, and it was planted. The root flare was under the soil. What happens to trees when you plant the root flare under the soil is it rots. And your tree, it's just like a death sentence for your tree. And you see how, and you drive down the road, you see how people are piling mulch up high up against the trunk of the tree. That is the biggest no-no. The mulch is supposed to create a well around the tree, exposing the tree root flare. And you really don't even need the well or the bowl, but some people like it because the water will, when it does rain, it tends to fill the bowl, which I don't know that I've ever seen that happen, but just a nice mulch around the tree with the root flare showing as the proper way to plant the tree. When you go to purchase a tree, really important, we have nurseries that carry a large inventory of trees, but some of those trees have been in that nursery maybe 2 or 3, 4 years, especially if you're looking for specimen trees that they've carried an awful lot of. So I really caution you to, when you're looking at a tree, look at the exposed roots. If there are any on the surface of the container, try to get an idea of how long the tree may have been at the nursery. Does it look like it's outgrowing its container? Is the root ball size proportion to the height of the tree? Meaning, is it a 8-foot tall tree in a 3-gallon pot? Then if you can, in smaller trees, specimen trees, you can pull the tree out of the container, try to slide it out, and then you're going to want to look for wrapping or girdling of the roots. Girdling is just the tree root wrapping around the ball, and because it had nowhere else to go, because it's been in the container way too long. Sometimes you can still purchase that tree, and when you go to plant it, you can kind of snip the roots so that they're not girdling anymore. But by no means do you plant a tree that has tree roots wrapping around the root ball. That tree will never branch, and the roots will never branch out into your soil. They will just continue to wrap, and your tree will not survive. So you just want to also make sure that the limbs are pliable, healthy, there are no wounds, scrapes, or broken limbs. You want to look for any kind of bug infestation, any kind of browning of the leaves if it's not that time of year, any kind of mold or mildew that might be on the leaves. And if you want a single trunk tree, then definitely look to make sure that the central leader on the tree is straight and there is not any kind of branching in the lower third of the tree. So that it'll grow straight. It'll be a beautiful addition to your garden with that central leader going up. If you come across a tree that has a straight trunk and then it branches in V, it still can be a nice tree for your garden, but just remember it's not going to grow more in a pyramid shape as it matures. It's going to grow out more in a rounded shape, and you're never going to be able to bring it back into a pyramid shape. So definitely keep that in mind with your when you're purchasing a tree. So now that's all my presentation. So do you all have any questions? Where is everybody?
See if we can unmute everybody here, and your pictures and your sound both. Yeah.
It was a very good presentation, Wanda.